The deserts of Egypt whisper with secrets carried across millennia, where the dry wind drifts over dunes that bury whole kingdoms beneath their silence. In this land of endless horizons, the pharaoh stood as both sovereign and god, a figure who did not merely rule but embodied the divine order of the cosmos. To the people who bowed before him, he was not simply a man, he was the living Horus, the son of Ra, a presence whose breath alone could hold chaos at bay. Yet behind this carefully constructed image lay the same vulnerability that shadows all humanity, the inescapable truth that even those who called themselves gods could not escape death. And so began the great paradox of Egyptian civilization, the attempt to master mortality itself. To understand their obsession with eternity, one must look at the Nile, the river that defined the rhythm of their lives. Each year, its floods drowned the fields, swallowing villages with waters that seemed destructive, only to retreat and leave behind rich black silt that allowed life to bloom again. To Egyptians, this cycle was not a disaster but a revelation, proof that death was never final, that after loss came rebirth. The land itself preached immortality, and the pharaoh became the highest expression of this truth. His reign was not a span of years but a chapter in an unbroken cycle. When he died, his successor was not merely another man but the continuation of the same eternal kingship. This way of thinking transformed the afterlife into a kind of perfected mirror of the earthly realm, a place they called the Field of Reeds, where crops grew without end and where loved ones reunited under gentle skies. But such a paradise required preparation. A man could not stumble into eternity. He had to be equipped with spells, with food, with tools and symbols that bound him to the gods. And most importantly, his body had to survive as a vessel. To Egyptians, the soul was not a single thing, but a complex duality. There was the Ka, the vital essence that needed nourishment, and the Ba, a spirit with wings that traveled between the worlds of the living and the dead. If the body crumbled, the Ka and Ba were left homeless, adrift in chaos, unable to find peace. The fear of annihilation was greater than the fear of death, and so their entire civilization bent itself toward the problem of preservation. The tomb became the answer, and with each century it grew more elaborate. At first these were simple mastabas, low benches of mud brick that housed offerings, but ambition soon turned these into pyramids, vast mountains of stone designed to pierce the heavens. Inside, narrow shafts aligned with constellations, while walls bore carvings of gods and rivers and celestial boats. These were not decorations but instructions, maps for the pharaoh to navigate eternity. Every jar of grain, every figurine of a servant, every amulet held meaning. A tomb was not a coffin, it was a palace frozen in time, designed to function forever. When the doors closed behind the priests and the sand drifted against the entrance, the structure became both a machine for resurrection and a time capsule, preserving daily life. For modern eyes, these treasures are priceless artifacts. For the ancient builders, they were survival itself. Even simple objects like a comb, a stool, or a necklace carried symbolic weight. To abandon them would be to arrive in the afterlife, naked and helpless. And so the tomb was stocked with everything from hunting weapons to jars of honey. Pharaohs demanded chariots of gold, ships dismantled and reassembled underground, and in some cases entire retinues of servants sacrificed to accompany them. Such excess was not vanity but necessity in their minds. Just as a king could not govern in life without an army and scribes, so too would he require them in eternity. Yet beneath the splendor ran an undercurrent of fear. The myths of Egypt spoke often of Osiris, the god who was murdered, dismembered, and resurrected by his sister and wife Isis. He became the first ruler of the dead, a judge who weighed every heart against the feather of truth. The pharaoh modeled himself after Osiris, promising his people that he too would rise again. But myths have sharp edges, and even kings were warned that if their hearts proved heavy with sin, they would be devoured by the monstrous Ammit, erased from existence. Here lay the contradiction at the center of Egyptian kingship. The pharaoh was a god, yet he could be destroyed like any other man. To conquer this fear, he had to build monuments on a scale so vast that even the desert itself might hesitate before erasing them. At night, when the priests lowered lamps into the tomb corridors, the walls seemed to shimmer with life. Painted figures of deities with animal heads stretched their hands toward the dead king, guiding him through realms of fire and shadow. Spells from the Book of the Dead were chanted in rhythmic tones, their sounds echoing off stone so that even silence seemed alive. Imagine standing in that chamber as the priests sealed the sarcophagus, the heavy lid grinding against granite, the air thick with incense. Outside, the stars of Orion burned above, the same stars that builders had aligned their pyramids with. To the Egyptians, the pharaoh would ascend to those stars, reborn as a celestial being, reigning not over a kingdom of sand but over eternity itself. The centuries have buried much of their world, yet the power of that vision remains. In every cracked statue and in every faded hieroglyph there is evidence of an empire determined to outwit death. Their tombs were not built for the eyes of the living but for the journey beyond. They hid their treasures underground, not only to protect them from thieves but to shield them from time itself. Each tomb was a gamble, a wager placed against the universe that memory could triumph over decay. And though many were looted, though dynasties fell and deserts reclaimed their palaces, the fascination endures because some of those gambles succeeded. We still read their names, we still marvel at their works, and in a sense, the pharaohs achieved the immortality they sought. But even as we uncover their monuments and translate their texts, the greatest secret remains unsolved. How exactly did they imagine this passage from death to life? What did they believe the moment of transformation felt like? The rituals preserved on temple walls hint at a science of the spirit that is now beyond our reach. The priests guarded these mysteries fiercely, passing them only to chosen initiates. To outsiders, even to many Egyptians, the precise mechanics of the afterlife were hidden. All we know is that the pharaohs trusted their tombs and their bodies to carry them through the threshold. This was the first and perhaps most profound secret they took to the grave. And so, as we follow the trail of their civilization, the story now shifts from the grandeur of their monuments to the intimacy of the body itself. For if the tomb was a palace for eternity, the body was its throne. The secret art of preserving flesh became the cornerstone of immortality, and it is there, in the realm of linen wrappings and hidden recipes, that the mystery deepens. The first great revelation of Egypt lies in the way they mastered death itself, transforming the fragile human body into something eternal. The deserts held their silence, yet within the sealed chambers of the pharaohs, the rituals of preservation carried on with precision. When a king breathed his last breath, the palace did not collapse into mourning. It shifted into a well-rehearsed sequence of preparations. Death was expected, almost anticipated, for to the Egyptians it was only a passage. The body of the pharaoh was immediately transformed from a frail shell of flesh into a sacred object, guarded by priests who had inherited recipes and rites older than the pyramids themselves. Every movement was guided by belief that the body must remain recognizable for eternity, for if it decayed, the spirit would lose its anchor and the entire gamble of immortality would fail. The priests began by purifying the body in sacred waters, washing away the dust of the earthly realm. Then came the delicate act of removing the organs. The heart was weighed against truth in the realm of Osiris, so it was often preserved with great care. The brain, however, was considered unnecessary for eternity. In a method that still fascinates modern scientists, slender hooks were inserted through the nose to pull the soft tissue free, leaving the skull hollow. To them, this was not desecration but preparation, clearing space for eternity. Each organ was treated with resins and oils, then sealed within canopic jars watched over by protective deities, falcon-headed, jackal-headed, baboon-headed, and human-faced guardians of the dead. Once emptied, the body was dried in natron, a natural salt harvested from the desert. The process lasted 40 days, echoing the cycles of the moon. Slowly the body shrank, moisture leaving, flesh tightening until only the husk of form remained. But this was not enough. Oils of cedar and resins of pine were massaged into the skin, the scent rising like incense, preserving and softening the texture. Spices and fragrant herbs filled the cavities, ensuring that the body smelled not of rot but of sanctity. The priests wrapped layer upon layer of linen, weaving prayers into each fold. Amulets were slipped between the wrappings, charms of lapis lazuli, turquoise and gold, each carrying spells to protect the pharaoh on his journey. The ritual was theater and science combined. As each bandage was wound, priests spoke spells that gave power to the wrappings themselves. They were not simply cloth, they were enchantments in physical form. In the end, what emerged was no longer a corpse but a monument in miniature, a being suspended between worlds. The gilded mask placed over the face was not decoration. It was a replacement for the fragile features of flesh. When the spirit awoke, it would recognize itself in that golden visage, unchanging for all time. The sarcophagus closed with a groan of stone, sealing the body inside layers of protection, granite within limestone, chamber within chamber, until no mortal eye could disturb it. Modern science has peeled back the mystery, analyzing chemical traces on bandages, fragments of resin hardened by millennia, oils absorbed into bone. In recent years, laboratories have identified ingredients far more complex than previously imagined, mixtures of cedar oil, pistachio resin, animal fats, and even rare compounds carried from distant lands. These were not crude preservatives, they were sophisticated recipes, evidence that Egyptian priests understood the chemistry of decay better than any of their contemporaries. Some substances had antibacterial properties, others sealed the skin against moisture, creating a shield that endured for thousands of years. In many cases, the body remains so lifelike that the skin retains its texture, the hair its color, and the very fingerprints of the pharaoh still visible beneath the wrappings. Yet for all we uncover, the full secrets remain beyond reach. The priests never left behind open manuals. Their knowledge was transmitted in whispers, guarded as closely as the tomb entrances themselves. Some variations were passed through dynasties, each generation refining the art. In certain cases, we find experiments, mummies poorly preserved, bodies blackened by resin overheated, or shriveled beyond recognition. These failures remind us that even in the most advanced ancient society, mastery was never absolute. Still, the persistence of their results is undeniable. A human being, dead for more than 3,000 years, lying before us today with face and hands still recognizable, is proof that the Egyptians achieved what they most desired. Consider the symbolism. To Egyptians, the act of mummification was not a cold mechanical task, but a sacred rebirth. As the bandages wound tighter, the body transformed into the cocoon of a butterfly. When the tomb sealed, the metamorphosis was complete, and the soul could awaken renewed. This is why so many tomb walls depict the pharaoh not only as a man, but as a falcon, a serpent, a radiant star. He was no longer bound by the limitations of flesh, and yet his flesh was preserved so that he might return whenever needed. This paradox lies at the center of their obsession, the belief that eternity required both the permanence of the body and the transcendence of the spirit. In the Valley of the Kings, where cliffs glow red under the setting sun, entire hillsides conceal these experiments in eternity. Hidden chambers stretch deep into limestone, their walls painted with protective spells, their ceilings scattered with stars. To step into one of these tombs is to feel as if time has stopped, as if the chants of priests still linger in the air. The silence is immense, the air heavy with the scent of earth and stone, and one can imagine the final moment when the entrance was sealed. Sand piled against the doorway, torches extinguished, and above, the desert resumed its endless shifting. What strikes us today is not only the preservation of flesh, but the preservation of memory. Each tomb was meant to ensure that the pharaoh would never be forgotten. Hieroglyphs carved deep into walls tell stories of battles, coronations, and offerings to the gods. These inscriptions were spells of remembrance, binding the name of the king to eternity. For Egyptians believed that to erase a name was to kill a soul. Thus every line, every symbol, was part of the same technology of immortality. Body, tomb, name, and myth were woven into one grand design. And yet, even with all this, the Egyptians knew their work was fragile. They guarded their tombs with curses, threats of divine punishment against thieves, illusions of false doors and hidden passages. But human greed and time itself proved stronger. Many tombs were plundered, their treasures melted down, their mummies torn apart in search of gold. Priests in later dynasties, horrified by this violation, removed the royal mummies and hid them in secret caches, where they remained undisturbed for centuries. In a way, this secrecy preserved the pharaohs more effectively than the tombs themselves. So when we gaze at these ancient faces today, peering through glass cases in museums or descending into the silent corridors of Luxor, we are witnessing the results of a science both practical and mystical. The Egyptians fought against decay with salts and oils, but also with stories and gods. They believed death could be defeated if only the body endured long enough for the soul to rise. That idea, carried through thousands of years, is why their civilization still captivates us. But while the art of mummification reveals the lengths they went to preserve eternity, it is not the whole story. For the tombs themselves still hold mysteries yet uncovered. Many chambers remain hidden, untouched beneath sand and stone, their passages revealed only by the faintest hints of radar and light. Even in the 21st century, we have not found all the pharaohs. Their shadows lie waiting in undiscovered tombs, silent yet unyielding. The pursuit of these lost chambers forms the next chapter in our journey, where archaeology and technology join hands in search of secrets that have slept for millennia. The story of the pharaohs cannot pause in the silence of the embalming halls. To complete the vision, we must follow the path from body to tomb, for the Egyptians believed that preservation was only one part of the greater journey. The tomb itself was the true stage on which immortality would be performed, and every stone, every chamber, every line of paint on the walls was designed to carry a king across the threshold of death. Imagine the Valley of the Kings in its time of glory. The desert cliffs loomed like guardians, their faces carved by wind into shapes resembling watchful eyes. Beneath those cliffs, hidden passages stretched into darkness, carved with painstaking precision by workers who labored not for decades but for lifetimes. These men were not slaves, as once imagined, but skilled artisans living in special villages, their families supported by the state, their purpose sacred. They descended each day into narrow shafts of stone, chiseling hieroglyphs, painting gods with pigments that still glow after thousands of years, and constructing halls whose ceilings were spattered with stars, so that even in death, the pharaoh would sleep beneath the sky. These tombs were not haphazard but planned like cosmic machines. Corridors twisted and descended, chambers expanded, sarcophagi rested at the very heart like seeds awaiting rebirth. The walls were alive with imagery. One chamber showed the journey of Ra, the sun god, across the 12 hours of night, battling serpents of chaos until he rose again in the dawn. Another chamber depicted the weighing of the heart, the scale balanced against the feather of truth. Still another bore magical boats sailing through rivers of fire, guarded by falcons and jackals. Each scene was not decoration but spellwork. The tomb itself was a book of magic, a three-dimensional scripture designed to guide the pharaoh through every peril of the afterlife. The treasures placed within were chosen with equal care. Food sealed in jars, bread baked to last eternity, honey that even now remains edible, jars of wine labeled with the year of the harvest, weapons with gilded handles, chairs of cedar imported from distant lands, even toys and games to amuse the spirit. These were not mere symbols but practical supplies for a journey the Egyptians believed was as real as life itself. Without them, the pharaoh would be stranded, unable to eat, drink, or defend himself in the other world. To us, the sight of a golden chariot buried underground seems strange, yet to them it was necessity, as vital as breath. The entire kingdom participated in this construction of eternity. Farmers offered grain to support the workers. Gold was mined in the eastern desert, carried across harsh terrain to be beaten into thin leaves and wrapped around statues of gods. Priests recited litanies to sanctify the process. When the tomb was at last sealed, it was not only the end of a reign, but the renewal of cosmic order. The pharaoh had died, but Egypt lived on because he had joined the gods, ensuring the flood of the Nile, the rising of the sun, the turning of the stars. Without this ritual, they believed, chaos would consume the world. And yet, for all their preparations, uncertainty lingered. The myths warned that the afterlife was dangerous, filled with gates guarded by monsters and judges ready to condemn. Even a pharaoh could fail if he was unworthy. This fear drove the precision of the rituals, the layering of spells upon spells, the sealing of doors upon doors. Each tomb was a fortress not only against robbers, but against cosmic annihilation. In this sense, the grandeur of Egypt was built on anxiety, on the dread that death might erase everything. Their monuments were acts of defiance, stone raised against oblivion. Today, as archaeologists descend into these chambers with electric lamps and scanning machines, we can still feel that defiance. The walls whisper with voices across time. The scent of resin lingers faintly in the dry air. Even the silence feels deliberate, as if engineered to make intruders pause in awe. And when coffins are opened, the sight of a face preserved for 3,000 years shocks us into recognition. These were people who believed so deeply in immortality that they bent nature to their will, and in doing so they achieved a strange kind of victory. We remember their names, their faces, their myths. They did not vanish, as so many other civilizations have, but remain vivid in the modern imagination. Yet this chapter of their story closes with a mystery still unsolved. If the Egyptians mastered the art of preserving flesh and building tombs that functioned as cosmic engines, what more might lie hidden in the sands? How many tombs remain undiscovered, their chambers still sealed, their treasures untouched? Recent explorations using radar and laser scans suggest entire wings of the Valley of the Kings remain unexplored. Some pharaohs known from records, such as Amenhotep I, have no tomb yet found, and legends whisper of Cleopatra, the last queen of Egypt, whose resting place has eluded searchers for centuries. The pharaohs believed they had built for eternity, and in some sense they succeeded, for their secrets still guard themselves. We uncover fragments, we reconstruct rituals, but the complete truth remains sealed in shadow. What was it truly like to awaken in the afterlife? Did they believe they saw the gods face to face, or did they imagine themselves becoming stars in the night sky? These questions drift unanswered, carried like sand on the desert wind. And so the first chapter of their eternal quest concludes, not with finality, but with a doorway opening to further mystery. The tomb was both palace and time capsule, a chamber where magic, memory, and science converged. Yet behind its sealed walls, the greatest secret was not the gold or the treasures, but the very technique by which Egyptians sought to defeat death. For them, immortality was not a metaphor, it was a project, carried out with chisel and pigment, salt and resin, prayer and chant. To understand their civilization, we must follow that project deeper, into the hidden laboratories of priests, into the unmarked chambers of the dead. The first secret of the pharaohs lies here, in their mastery of death, and it leads us inevitably toward the art of mummification, the science of eternity itself. The Egyptian desert holds more than silence. It holds a knowledge of death so refined that even today it astonishes scientists and historians alike. For the pharaohs, preserving the body was not vanity, it was necessity, and the priests who served them guarded their techniques as jealously as kings guarded thrones. To these priests, the body was not simply a vessel, it was the anchor of eternity. Without it, the soul would wander lost, cut off from the paradise of the field of reeds. Thus began one of the most enduring secrets of the ancient world, the art of mummification, a practice that fused ritual, chemistry, and cosmic belief into a single act of transformation. When a pharaoh died, the entire kingdom shifted into ritual motion. Messengers carried word to priests who lived in special compounds, trained for generations in the science of preservation. The body of the king was taken to a hidden place, often near the Nile, where water, salt, and sacred oils were prepared. There, in the heat of the desert, began the delicate process of converting flesh into eternity. The priests did not work as mourners, they worked as craftsmen of immortality, each step performed with precision and secrecy. To touch the royal body was both an honor and a burden, for one mistake could doom the soul of a god-king. The process unfolded in stages that lasted over 2 months. First, the corpse was washed in water drawn from the Nile, the river that symbolized rebirth itself. The act of cleansing was not mere hygiene, it was symbolic, a purification that stripped away the corruption of death. Next came the removal of the internal organs, a step both practical and mystical. The stomach, intestines, lungs, and liver were carefully extracted, each treated with resins and preserved in canopic jars. These jars bore the forms of protective deities, guardians who would watch over the organs for eternity. The falcon-headed god guarded the intestines, the jackal-headed god the stomach, the baboon-headed god the lungs, and the human-faced guardian the liver. Only the heart, seat of the soul, was sometimes left in place, for it was destined to be weighed in the afterlife against the feather of truth. The brain, by contrast, was not considered necessary. Priests removed it through the nose with slender hooks, a procedure that still shocks modern viewers. To them, this was not an act of desecration but of liberation, clearing away what was deemed unimportant for eternity. With the body emptied of its fragile contents, the priests turned to the most vital step, the drying of the flesh. The corpse was covered in natron, a mineral salt gathered from desert lakes. For 40 days it rested, as the salt drew out every drop of moisture. Slowly the body shrank and hardened, the skin tightening, the muscles desiccating until only a husk remained. But that husk was not death, it was preparation for transformation. Once dried, the body was anointed with oils and resins. These were no simple substances. Analyses in modern laboratories have revealed mixtures of cedar oil, pistachio resin, juniper, beeswax, and even bitumen carried from distant lands. Many of these compounds had antibacterial properties, sealing the flesh against decay. The priests, without microscopes or chemical formulas, had learned through centuries of trial and error that such substances resisted the corruption of time. The body was not embalmed in ignorance, it was embalmed with knowledge that had been guarded and refined over hundreds of years. The wrapping came last, and it was perhaps the most profound stage. Linen strips were wound around the body, hundreds of meters of cloth transformed into layers of protection. Between these layers, priests inserted amulets, small objects of stone, faience, or gold, each engraved with spells of protection. A scarab might rest upon the chest, ensuring the heart could speak truth. An eye symbol might guard against evil forces. Each amulet was a weapon for the afterlife, a charm that gave the spirit power. As the wrappings continued, priests spoke words from the Book of the Dead, chants that bound the spells to the body. The linen was no longer cloth, it became scripture, and the mummy no longer flesh, it became an artifact of eternity. The final act was the placing of a mask over the face. For common people, this might be simple painted wood, but for pharaohs it was gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli and carnelian. The mask did more than protect the features, it preserved identity. When the spirit awoke, it would see itself reflected in that golden visage, shining and unchanging, immune to decay. The coffin was then sealed, often nested within multiple layers, and finally placed inside a sarcophagus carved from granite or limestone. Surrounding it were shrines, statues, and treasures, all carefully arranged to ensure the pharaoh was prepared for eternity. To us, the process seems morbid, but to the Egyptians, it was sacred rebirth. They imagined the wrapped body as a cocoon, waiting to awaken as something greater. Death was not the end, it was the doorway, and mummification was the key that unlocked it. Without it, the pharaoh would vanish into chaos, erased forever. With it, he could rise again as a star in the night sky, a god among gods. The art of mummification was thus not simply preservation, it was the science of resurrection. And yet, for all we know, much remains hidden. Recent studies have uncovered embalming workshops buried near the necropolises of Saqqara and Thebes. In these underground rooms, archaeologists have found clay vessels still labeled with hieratic script, naming the substances they contained. For the first time, we can match the recipes of the priests with the chemicals themselves. These discoveries reveal a sophistication that continues to surprise us, but they also remind us that countless secrets are still buried in the sands, perhaps forever beyond our reach. The priests who performed these rituals never left their full instructions on temple walls. They wrote of the gods, of journeys through night and fire, but they did not reveal their exact mixtures or methods. This silence was intentional. Knowledge of death was dangerous, and to them it was forbidden for outsiders to wield it. Only initiates sworn to secrecy could inherit it. This is why the true art of mummification died with them, preserved only in fragments, revived only through archaeology and science thousands of years later. The fascination endures because the results endure. To look upon a mummy is to look into a face that has survived 3 millennia, a face that still bears eyelashes, skin, and sometimes even the faint shadow of a smile. It is the triumph of human determination against decay, the defiance of a civilization that refused to accept mortality. The priests achieved what they set out to do. They created bodies that would last for eternity, and in doing so, they carried their pharaohs into history itself. But if the art of mummification astonishes us, the tombs that housed these preserved kings astonish even more. For while the body was protected, the resting place was built as a palace of eternity, and many such palaces have never been found. In the shadow of cliffs and beneath layers of sand lie lost chambers that may still conceal treasures, secrets, and kings whose names are known but whose tombs remain undiscovered. The next chapter of this journey takes us there, into the search for the lost tombs of Egypt. The sands of Egypt do not give up their secrets easily. Even when the priests had perfected the ritual of mummification, they knew the greatest danger was not decay, but violation. A tomb, no matter how well hidden, was vulnerable to thieves and invaders. And so the process of preparing a pharaoh for eternity extended beyond the body. It extended into architecture, chemistry, and deception, all woven together into a system designed to shield the dead from both time and human greed. The art of mummification was inseparable from the design of the tomb itself, and together they formed a twofold armor meant to preserve the king for all ages. The embalming halls were not places of mourning but laboratories of eternity. Archaeologists have uncovered rooms filled with ceramic vessels, their surfaces still marked with inked symbols naming what they once contained. Oils of cedar, resins of pistachio, and honey collected from desert bees were stored here, waiting for the moment when priests would mix them into pastes and ointments. In one recently discovered chamber near Saqqara, dozens of vessels carried inscriptions that modern scientists have been able to decode. The writing does not only say oil or resin, but gives precise instructions such as for the head or to soften the skin. These fragments provide the first direct evidence that the priests followed recipes as exact as those of modern pharmacists, blending ingredients with care, assigning them to different parts of the body. What astonishes researchers is how effective these mixtures were. Cedar oil contains natural phenols that resist bacteria. Bitumen, a tar-like substance imported from distant lands, creates a waterproof barrier against moisture. Even plant extracts like juniper and cinnamon have antibacterial properties. The Egyptians may not have understood microbes as we do, but they observed the results of decay and learned which substances delayed it. Over centuries, they built a knowledge system that combined observation, ritual, and myth into formulas powerful enough to keep bodies intact for millennia. Modern tests on wrappings from mummies show layers impregnated with these resins, hardened into shields as tough as plastic. Some bandages, more than 3,000 years old, still carry the scent of pine and cedar when burned. But science was only half the story. Each step of embalming was performed within the structure of sacred ritual. The wrapping of limbs was accompanied by chants, each phrase binding protective magic to the linen. Priests wore masks of Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming, so that the god himself would be present at the ceremony. Tools used in the process were sometimes broken afterward, symbolically severing their tie to the world of the living. Inscriptions carved on papyri describe spells meant to open the mouth of the mummy, a ritual that restored speech and breath so that the spirit could live again. For Egyptians, the act of preservation was never simply material. The body was transformed into a bridge between worlds, a place where the soul could return again and again. The tomb then became the stage where this preserved form would wait out eternity. In the Valley of the Kings, passages cut deep into limestone were painted with spells and stars. In one famous tomb, the entire ceiling is covered with a map of the heavens, a sky of golden constellations on deep blue plaster. In another, the walls describe in detail the journey of Ra through the hours of night, a guidebook for the soul of the king. These tombs were not silent vaults. They were designed as interactive spaces, every surface alive with magic. The body within was protected not only by salt and resin, but by a barrage of symbols, words, and images meant to ward off every threat the afterlife might contain. Still, the priests understood that danger also came from the living. Tomb robbers haunted the necropolises, driven by hunger, greed, and desperation. To fight them, architects filled passages with false doors, blocked corridors with rubble, and painted curses on the walls. Some tombs contained hidden chambers with decoy treasures, meant to mislead intruders, while the true burial chamber lay deeper within. The embalmed pharaoh rested at the center of a labyrinth, guarded by both physical barriers and spiritual traps. The combination of embalming and architecture was a grand attempt to create eternity by force of will. When modern archaeologists peer into these chambers with flashlights and scanning machines, they step into spaces where the fusion of science and belief is still tangible. Mummies examined under X-ray reveal layers of resin, some poured still molten over the body, sealing the wrappings into hardened shells. Others show evidence of experimentation, with priests testing new formulas, some successful, some disastrous. In one case, the resin overheated and carbonized, turning the body black as charcoal. Even gods in flesh were subject to human error. Yet the persistence of their work is undeniable. The mummies that remain are proof that their art succeeded more often than it failed. This blending of ritual and chemistry was not unique to pharaohs. Nobles, priests, and even wealthy citizens underwent similar treatments, though often with less lavish materials. But the scale of royal mummification set it apart. Pharaohs demanded perfection. Their wrappings contained hundreds of meters of linen. Their coffins were nested like Russian dolls, one inside another, layers of wood and gold sealing the body within. Surrounding the sarcophagus, shrines covered in gold leaf formed protective barriers, each inscribed with the names of gods. The effect was to place the pharaoh not in a coffin but in a cosmic fortress, defended from all sides. And yet, beneath all this grandeur, the secret heart of mummification was fragile knowledge passed through generations of priests. When dynasties fell and temples crumbled, that knowledge began to fade. By the time Greek and Roman writers described the process, much of its precision had already been lost. What they saw were crude imitations, stripped of their chemical subtleties, reduced to rituals without depth. The original art remained locked in the sealed chambers of the past. Only now, with modern science, are we beginning to glimpse its full sophistication. The fascination with mummies has never faded. From the first explorers who opened coffins in candlelight to the scientists who now extract DNA with sterile instruments, the sight of preserved flesh awakens awe and unease. To look into the face of someone who lived 3,000 years ago, their features still recognizable, is to feel time collapse. It is as if the pharaohs truly achieved what they sought. They live on, not in spirit alone but in body, their presence undeniable, their secrets still guarded beneath resin and linen. But the story of mummification is incomplete without the tombs that remain hidden. For every pharaoh whose body we have found, there are others whose resting places lie undiscovered, their treasures untouched, their secrets waiting. The Valley of the Kings still holds mysteries, and technology now reveals hints of chambers that may yet yield revelations. The art of preserving the body ensured survival, but the art of hiding the tomb ensured secrecy. It is to those lost tombs, still buried in silence, that our journey must now turn. The Egyptians never doubted that the body could be made eternal. They trusted in their priests, in their rituals, in the resins and salts that turned flesh into stone. Yet eternity was a precarious thing. It was not enough to embalm the pharaoh with the finest oils or wrap him in linen blessed by 100 chants. The dead king needed protection for the ages, protection from thieves who cared nothing for spells, and from time itself, which erodes even the hardest stone. This is why the art of mummification must always be understood as more than preservation. It was a grand project of concealment, of mystery, of sealing knowledge and flesh together so tightly that neither could be undone. Archaeologists working in recent decades have come closer than ever to understanding just how sophisticated this art was. In laboratories across the world, fragments of linen and traces of resin are analyzed under powerful microscopes. What emerges is evidence that the embalmers did not simply improvise, but followed complex recipes. Some resins were heated to become liquid and then poured over the wrappings, hardening into protective shells. Others were ground into powders and mixed with oils to be rubbed into the skin. Chemical signatures show ingredients imported from hundreds of kilometers away, proof that the pharaohs commanded trade networks stretching across deserts and seas simply to acquire the tools of immortality. In one case, scientists identified traces of resins that could only have come from Southeast Asia, suggesting a web of exchange far larger than we once believed. This global reach emphasizes how vital mummification was to Egyptian belief. Imagine the caravans trudging through deserts with jars of resin, ships sailing the Mediterranean, carrying cedar logs from Lebanon, traders crossing mountains with spices that would one day anoint the body of a king. All of this movement, all of this labor, was directed toward the single goal of defeating death. The embalming hall became the endpoint of global commerce, where materials from distant lands were transformed into potions of eternity. Every drop of oil, every pinch of resin, carried within it the weight of an empire determined to outwit time. And yet, for all this effort, the priests understood that preservation was not invulnerability. They wove layers of secrecy into their practices. The recipes they used were memorized and passed down only to chosen initiates. Written records were scarce, and those that survived were deliberately vague, filled with sacred names and metaphors rather than practical instructions. Even the papyri that describe embalming often speak in riddles, cloaking chemistry in the language of gods. To the priests, this secrecy was essential. The knowledge of eternity was dangerous. In the wrong hands it could be corrupted, and so it was hidden, like the tombs themselves, deep beneath the surface. Modern researchers sometimes marvel that such secrecy could endure, and yet the evidence is all around us. Entire techniques have been lost. We still do not know exactly how some mummies were preserved with such perfection that their skin appears almost lifelike, their hair still shining, their features untouched by centuries. We can analyze the materials, but the precise method, the timing, the chance, the combinations remain locked away. What we encounter is the result, not the full recipe. This is why mummies continue to fascinate, because they embody secrets that resist even our most advanced science. The experience of encountering a mummy is not only intellectual, it is visceral. To stand before a glass case in a museum and look at a face preserved for 3,000 years is to feel the barrier of time dissolve. The eyelashes are still there, the nails still curved, the lips still defined. It is not like looking at a statue, it is like meeting a person across millennia. And in that moment, we understand why the Egyptians believed they had triumphed. The pharaohs may not have awakened as gods among stars, but they have survived. Their bodies command attention, their names are spoken, their presence endures. In a way, their gamble worked. But even this triumph reveals its limits. For all the mummies displayed under bright museum lights, countless more remain hidden in the sands. Some were plundered and burned, their wrappings stolen, their treasures stripped. Others were gathered by priests in later dynasties and hidden in secret caches to save them from robbers. And still others, perhaps many more than we know, remain undisturbed, their tombs undiscovered. It is this possibility that drives modern exploration, the chance that somewhere in the cliffs of Luxor or beneath the sands of the Delta lies another sealed chamber, another preserved king, another revelation of ancient knowledge. The art of mummification shows us that the Egyptians were both scientists and magicians, engineers and dreamers. They combined observation with belief, chemistry with prayer, architecture with myth. They understood that eternity required more than hope. It required labor, precision, secrecy, and will. The mummies that remain are not accidents of preservation. They are deliberate creations designed with purpose and conviction. They are the ultimate artifacts of a civilization obsessed with defeating death. And so this chapter closes with the recognition that while we can uncover fragments of their methods, the full truth may never be ours. The priests took their greatest secrets to the grave, sealing them in wrappings of linen and silence. The bodies endure, but the knowledge that made them endure remains elusive, glimpsed only in traces of resin, in faint inscriptions, in the stubborn survival of flesh. That is why Egypt continues to captivate. It is not only the gold and the grandeur, it is the sense that a civilization once touched the edges of eternity and left behind proof, yet withheld the formula. The tombs where these mummies rest still hide deeper mysteries. Some kings known from records have no resting places that we can find. Their names appear on temple walls, their reigns carved into stone, but their bodies are missing, their tombs lost. The art of mummification was powerful, but without the tomb it was incomplete. To seek those lost chambers is to pursue the continuation of this story, a story that leads us into darkness beneath the desert, where radar and light reveal hints of what may still lie waiting. The lost tombs of Egypt call to us from beneath the sand, and it is there that our investigation must now go. The desert of Egypt is a patient guardian. For thousands of years it has hidden entire worlds beneath its shifting sands, swallowing temples, palaces, and graves until they became little more than whispers carried by the wind. Among these buried secrets are the tombs of kings and queens whose names we know, rulers inscribed on temple walls and carved into colossal statues, yet whose resting places remain unfound. The Valley of the Kings, with its honeycomb of corridors and hidden chambers, is only a fragment of what lies beneath the earth. Every excavation, every radar scan, every fragment of rumor suggests that the sands conceal far more than we have uncovered. The pharaohs built for eternity, and eternity still guards them well. The known tombs already stagger the imagination. The chambers of Seti I descend hundreds of meters, their walls alive with painted spells that glow even now when torchlight or electric light touches them. The tomb of Ramesses VI stretches with corridors whose ceilings are scattered with stars, as if the king sleeps beneath the night sky forever. Yet even as archaeologists marvel at these wonders, they are haunted by absence. Amenhotep I, one of the great rulers of the 18th dynasty, has no tomb yet found. Cleopatra VII, last of the pharaohs, has a name etched into history, but no grave to anchor her memory. These absences are not small curiosities. They are voids in our understanding, mysteries that remind us that Egypt has not yet revealed all of its secrets. Consider the Valley of the Kings itself. Carved into the limestone cliffs near Thebes, it contains more than 60 tombs, some small, others vast labyrinths of corridors and chambers. Yet for all the centuries of exploration, scholars believe more remain hidden. In recent years, radar and LiDAR scans have revealed anomalies beneath the ground, spaces that could be empty cavities or could be undiscovered chambers. The tantalizing possibility that new tombs lie waiting has stirred the imagination of scientists and dreamers alike. Each anomaly sparks debate. Is it merely a natural void in the rock, or is it the sealed entrance to another world? The technology can hint, but it cannot confirm. Only excavation can provide answers, and excavation is slow, deliberate, and bound by the weight of responsibility. One of the most persistent mysteries lies beside the tomb of Tutankhamun. Discovered in 1922, his burial chamber was surprisingly small for a king, leading some to wonder if it was originally built for someone else. In 2015, scans suggested that hidden chambers might lie beyond the painted walls, perhaps even the resting place of Nefertiti, the elusive queen whose face is known from the famous bust in Berlin but whose body has never been identified. The possibility electrified the world, for such a discovery would rank among the greatest in history. Yet further scans brought contradiction, some showing signs of voids, others showing nothing at all. The tomb of Tutankhamun remains as much a riddle now as it was when Howard Carter first peered inside with a candle. But the valley is only one part of the story. The sands of the delta and the cliffs of the western desert hold countless other sites, many scarcely explored. The great necropolis of Saqqara, with its step pyramids and underground catacombs, still yields surprises each year. In recent times, archaeologists have unearthed dozens of sealed coffins there, untouched for millennia, their colors still vivid, their bodies still preserved. If such finds can appear in areas already studied for centuries, how many more remain in the untouched reaches of the desert? Each grain of sand seems a veil, and beneath it, an empire waits. What drives the search is not only curiosity, but a sense of incompleteness. The pharaohs were meticulous record keepers. They carved their names on walls, raised stelae to mark victories, built temples to proclaim their divinity. We know of rulers whose names are preserved in stone, yet their tombs are missing. It is as if chapters of a book have been torn out, leaving the narrative jagged and unfinished. To find those tombs would be to restore missing pieces of history, to hear voices silenced for 3,000 years. And beyond history, there is the raw human desire to look upon a face that has not been seen since the day it was buried. The possibility of discovery keeps the valley alive with expectation. Archaeologists move cautiously, peeling back layers of sand, reading the ground like a map, listening for the faintest hints of chambers. Each dig is a gamble. Months of effort may yield nothing but rubble, or may reveal a doorway sealed since the Bronze Age. The desert is indifferent. It keeps its silence whether we succeed or fail. Yet persistence has been rewarded before. Every tomb discovered has reshaped our understanding, revealing new rituals, new art, new glimpses into the minds of those who believed they could master eternity. What makes the lost tombs so compelling is not only their potential wealth of treasures, but the sense that they hold unfinished stories. The tomb of Cleopatra, wherever it lies, would close the saga of the pharaohs with drama worthy of her legend. The tomb of Amenhotep I could reveal the transition between generations that shaped Egypt's golden age. Countless lesser-known kings and queens, their names preserved only in fragmentary inscriptions, wait to be reintroduced to the world. Each hidden chamber is not only a burial but a library, a record preserved in stone and pigment, waiting to speak again. And so the search continues. In the Valley of the Kings, in the cliffs of Luxor, in the desert plateaus stretching westward. The tools have changed, from chisels and candles to radar and drones, but the dream remains the same. To uncover what the desert has hidden, to bring back into light what was meant for eternity, to stand once more in the presence of those who shaped the ancient world. The lost tombs of Egypt are more than places of burial. They are promises unfulfilled, mysteries half told. And as long as the sands hold them, the story of the pharaohs remains unfinished, their secrets still intact, waiting for the day we find the courage and patience to uncover them. The Valley of the Kings lies quiet beneath a blistering sun, but the silence is deceptive. Beneath its limestone cliffs, dozens of kings and princes once prepared their eternal houses, carving passageways deep into the rock, adorning them with prayers and visions of the afterlife, and sealing themselves within sarcophagi that were meant never to be disturbed. Yet even here, the place most associated with royal burials, the earth has not given up all its inhabitants. The tombs we know may be only a fraction of those that exist. The Egyptians were masters of concealment, and their efforts succeeded so well that even after thousands of years we still cannot say how many chambers remain undiscovered. The idea that lost tombs still lie beneath the valley is not mere fantasy. The very discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb proved it. For centuries the area had been combed by archaeologists and plundered by robbers, yet Carter uncovered a chamber untouched by either, its treasures dazzling the world. If one tomb could hide in plain sight for so long, why not others? Geological surveys hint at voids beneath the valley floor, shapes too regular to be natural. Some are narrow passages, others vast cavities. Technology reveals shadows of possibility, but never certainty. The only proof lies in excavation, and excavation moves at the pace of years, each square meter examined with painstaking care. Beyond the valley itself, other landscapes hold their own enigmas. At Abu Sir, at Saqqara, at Dahshur, pyramid complexes stand partly ruined, their outer layers stripped by time and reuse, but their subterranean passages remain only partially mapped. These were not minor kings but rulers who once commanded vast resources, and yet their tombs are absent from our records. Inscriptions name them, temples bear their cartouches, but their final resting places have slipped into shadow. Each new discovery in these regions expands the map of Egypt's sacred geography, suggesting that many more tombs lie beyond our current reach. Among the most sought after is the tomb of Cleopatra. Her life and death marked the end of the Pharaonic age, the close of a story that had lasted 3 millennia. Legends tell of her burial with Mark Antony, the Roman general whose fate was bound to hers. Ancient writers suggest they were entombed together, perhaps near Alexandria, in a shrine now swallowed by sea and shifting earth. To find that tomb would not only be an archaeological triumph, but a symbolic one, reuniting history with its final queen. Searches along the coast have uncovered traces of temples and sanctuaries drowned by earthquakes and tides, yet the queen's resting place remains elusive. Whether hidden deep beneath the seabed or sealed within the ruins of forgotten sanctuaries, Cleopatra waits, her story unfinished. There are also rulers less known, yet no less compelling. Amenhotep I is remembered as a builder and reformer, his reign part of the 18th dynasty's rise to glory. Records confirm his existence, and later, mummies were reburied in caches to protect them from robbers, but his tomb remains missing. To uncover it would illuminate the early days of Egypt's golden age, revealing the transition between generations that gave rise to the empire's zenith. Other pharaohs, too, are shadows. Their names echo through temple inscriptions, their deeds carved into walls, but their bodies are absent, their tombs sealed away somewhere in the desert's vast silence. The question lingers: how many more tombs could be waiting? Some archaeologists argue for dozens, others for only a handful, but all agree that the story is incomplete. Radar surveys show voids, but interpreting them is fraught with uncertainty. Limestone caves can mimic man-made shapes, and the desert often deceives. Each supposed chamber must be tested, excavated, confirmed. Even then, the desert resists. Sand floods corridors as fast as they are cleared. Rock collapses and conceals entrances anew. What we know of the valley is but the surface of a far larger network. The possibility of lost tombs feeds imagination because each discovery reshapes our understanding of Egypt. A single burial can alter history, as Tutankhamun's did. Before his tomb was found, he was a nearly forgotten boy king. Afterward, he became the most famous pharaoh of all time. His treasures rewrote our perception of Egyptian art and craftsmanship. If such revelations lay hidden in one small chamber, what could the tomb of Cleopatra reveal? What could the burial of Amenhotep I tell us? The sands do not just conceal bodies, they conceal history itself. Even now, work continues. Archaeologists map the valley with drones, probe with radar, and photograph with cameras sensitive enough to catch subtle shifts in density beneath stone. Each new season brings announcements, hints of anomalies, speculation that another tomb may be near. The excitement never fades, for Egypt is inexhaustible. The pharaohs built to defy death, and in doing so, they ensured that their story would never truly end. Every uncovered chamber is both a discovery and a promise, a reminder that the greatest finds may still lie waiting. The lost tombs remain silent, but their silence speaks. It reminds us that Egypt is not finished, that its sands still guard secrets meant for eternity. Each new excavation is a confrontation with that silence, a demand for revelation. And yet, the desert yields only slowly, as if testing our patience, as if asking whether we are worthy of the knowledge it holds. The pharaohs built their tombs to last forever, and forever is a long time. We may only be at the beginning of what they left behind. The silence of the desert is deceptive, for beneath its stillness lie corridors of stone carved by hands that have long since turned to dust. Egypt was never a land that accepted the finality of death. To them, eternity was not an idea, it was a construction project, measured in blocks of limestone, in pigments painted on plaster, in bodies treated with salt and resin. And yet, even with such determination, many of the tombs that once held kings and queens are missing from the record. This absence is not simply an inconvenience to historians, it is a reminder that the desert itself has become the greatest tomb, holding secrets that resist even the sharpest tools of archaeology. The search for lost tombs is not only about the past, it is also about the way we imagine the future of discovery. When Howard Carter uncovered the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922, the world realized that Egypt could still astonish. That small chamber, packed to its ceiling with treasures, transformed our understanding of ancient life. The gold mask, the chariots, the shrines, the jeweled daggers, all of them revealed a sophistication that scholars had underestimated. If such wonders lay hidden for thousands of years, what more could be waiting beneath the sand? Each unmarked mound, Each irregular line in the rock, each anomaly on a radar scan, is now seen as a possible gateway to another revelation. Technology has sharpened our search. LiDAR scans from aircraft can map the terrain with laser beams, stripping away sand to reveal subtle depressions and shapes invisible to the naked eye. Ground-penetrating radar sends signals through stone, hinting at voids and chambers. Infrared satellites detect differences in temperature that can reveal buried walls or passageways. These tools extend our vision beneath the surface, but they cannot tell us exactly what lies there. They whisper of hidden spaces, but whether those spaces are tombs, caves, or illusions of geology remains uncertain until the spade breaks ground. The desert keeps its secrets, even as we surround it with machines. One of the most debated mysteries of recent years came from the tomb of Tutankhamun. Scans suggested that behind the decorated wall of his burial chamber, there might be another room, perhaps even the lost tomb of Nefertiti. The thought electrified the world. Imagine opening a wall painted more than 3,000 years ago to find another chamber sealed in darkness. The debate has raged, with some scans suggesting voids, others suggesting nothing at all. For now, the truth remains unproven, but the possibility lingers, tantalizing and unresolved, a reminder that Egypt is never finished with us. Other searches carry the same air of suspense. Along the Mediterranean coast, divers explore ruins drowned by earthquakes, hoping to find the mausoleum of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Inland, teams probe cliffs and plateaus, seeking the tombs of kings mentioned in records but absent from the ground. Each site carries its own risks: political, environmental, and financial. Excavations can take decades, and each step must balance preservation with discovery. A single mistake can destroy evidence that has survived untouched for thousands of years. Archaeology in Egypt is a dialogue with time, and time is not patient. Sandstorms shift landscapes, rising waters threaten ruins, and modern expansion presses against ancient land. Yet even with these challenges, the search continues because the reward is immeasurable. A lost tomb is not simply a burial place. It is a time capsule, sealed with objects, art, and knowledge. Every new find reveals details of daily life, from the bread baked for the afterlife to the pigments used on painted walls. Each artifact adds texture to the story of a civilization that still shapes our imagination. The lost tombs are not only about kings, they are about the workers who carved the chambers, the priests who filled them with magic, the families who brought offerings. They are about Egypt itself, a culture that lived in constant dialogue with death, and through that dialogue created eternity. Standing in the Valley of the Kings at dusk, as shadows lengthen and the cliffs glow red in the sinking sun, one can feel the presence of those still buried. The ground beneath your feet is not empty. It is full of stories, sealed in darkness, waiting. Somewhere beneath those cliffs lies Amenhotep I, a king whose reign helped shape the Golden Age but whose tomb remains hidden. Somewhere else perhaps lies the queen who defied Rome, Cleopatra, her memory caught between legend and silence. And scattered throughout the desert are lesser-known rulers, princes, generals and priests, each with their own chapter of history, each with their own treasures and secrets. The allure of the lost tombs is not just about what we might find, but about what remains withheld. Egypt teaches us humility. It shows us that even with satellites, lasers, and laboratories, there are limits to what we can know. The Pharaohs built for eternity, and eternity is not easily persuaded. The desert has guarded them for 3,000 years, and it may guard them for 3,000 more. What we do discover feels like a gift, offered not because we demanded it, but because time allowed it. And so the chapter closes, not with resolution, but with anticipation. The lost tombs of Egypt remain hidden, their treasures uncounted, their voices unheard. But they are there, beneath the sand, beneath the rock, beneath the silence. Each year brings new hints, new possibilities, and the sense that the next great discovery may be just beneath our feet. The desert does not speak, yet it holds stories louder than any we know. And as we listen, we prepare for the moment when another sealed doorway opens, another forgotten king rises into the light, and another secret the pharaohs took to the grave is finally revealed. The story of Tutankhamun begins not with his birth, but with his death. It was in the autumn of 1922 that the world first peered into the silence of his sealed chamber, a silence that had endured for more than 3,000 years. In the Valley of the Kings, under a desert sun that bleached stone to white, a team of archaeologists led by Howard Carter brushed away sand from a staircase hidden beneath debris. With each step uncovered, anticipation grew. For decades, the valley had been searched, mapped, and plundered, and many scholars believed it had yielded all its secrets. Yet here, by chance and persistence, a doorway emerged, its plaster still intact, its seals unbroken. Behind that sealed door waited the boy king who would change the modern world's view of ancient Egypt forever. Howard Carter's discovery was not sudden magic, but the result of years of frustration and grit. Financed by Lord Carnarvon, an English aristocrat whose wealth supported the dig, Carter had endured seasons of failure. Tomb after tomb yielded little more than broken pottery and traces of long-vanished burials. The excavation was on the verge of collapse when, in November of 1922, a water carrier stumbled upon a carved step. Carter's men cleared the area, and soon a full staircase was revealed, descending into the earth. At its base lay a sealed door, stamped with the cartouche of Tutankhamun, a name barely remembered in the modern world. The significance struck Carter immediately. This was no ordinary find. If the seals were intact, this was a royal tomb undisturbed. When the doorway was breached, Carter peered inside by candlelight. His eyes adjusted slowly to the glow reflected from gold. Lord Carnarvon, breathless, asked if he could see anything. Carter replied with words that would echo through history. Yes, wonderful things. And so the world was reintroduced to Tutankhamun, a king who had reigned for less than a decade and died around the age of 19, yet whose burial would become the most famous in all of archaeology. The treasures that filled his tomb stunned not only scholars but the public at large. Golden thrones, inlaid chariots, jewelry of lapis lazuli and carnelian, statues, shrines, and finally, the golden mask that has become the face of ancient Egypt itself. The sheer richness of the tomb defied imagination. Unlike other royal burials that had been looted in antiquity, Tutankhamun's chamber was nearly intact. It was small, suggesting it may have been meant for someone else originally, but it was packed to bursting with objects meant to serve the king in eternity. Beds, shaped like lions and cows, boxes filled with weapons, board games, jars of wine, baskets of food, clothing folded as if waiting to be worn. Every object carried meaning. The pharaoh would not face the afterlife unprepared. To step into that tomb was to step directly into the world of ancient Egypt, as if time had stopped the moment the door was sealed. But with wonder came whispers of something darker. Not long after the discovery, Lord Carnarvon died from an infected mosquito bite, and newspapers seized on the coincidence. They spoke of a curse, an ancient warning against those who disturbed the king. Soon every death, illness, or misfortune connected to the excavation was added to the legend. Though scholars dismissed the curse as superstition, the idea spread quickly. Journalists printed stories of strange lights flickering over the Valley of the Kings, of animals behaving oddly, of servants whispering that they had angered the gods. Tutankhamun's tomb became not only a symbol of discovery, but a stage for fear, where the ancient belief in curses found a new audience in the modern age. The truth behind the so-called curse was far less mystical. Many of those involved in the discovery lived long lives. Howard Carter himself lived until 1939, nearly 2 decades after entering the tomb. Scientists suggest that mold or bacteria in the sealed chamber could have posed health risks, but no evidence supports the idea of a deadly plague unleashed by the mummy. The curse, in reality, was a creation of human imagination, a blending of genuine awe with the desire for drama. Yet it had power, for it reminded people that Egypt had always been a land of mystery, a place where life and death danced close together. Even today, the words "Curse of the Pharaohs" conjure images of shadows moving in the torchlight of underground corridors. Still, the curse is only the surface of Tutankhamun's legacy. The real significance lies in what the tomb revealed about the life of the boy king. His reign was brief, following the turbulent Amarna period when Akhenaten, likely his father, had upended Egypt's religion by focusing worship on the sun disk Aten. Tutankhamun restored the old gods and temples, but his youth and frailty limited his influence. He died suddenly, leaving mysteries that still puzzle scholars. Was it illness, accident, or even murder? His body became the key to those questions, and with modern science, new answers have emerged. Computed tomography scans of his mummy show evidence of a broken leg, possibly fractured shortly before death. DNA analysis suggests that Tutankhamun suffered from malaria and from genetic conditions linked to inbreeding, for the royal family often married within itself to preserve bloodlines. His body bears signs of deformities, including a cleft palate and clubfoot, explaining the canes found in his tomb. The golden throne shows him seated while his queen applies ointment to him, an image that may reflect his physical weakness. Far from the image of a powerful warrior king, Tutankhamun may have been a fragile boy struggling with disease. His sudden death likely forced a hurried burial, explaining the cramped tomb and the overlapping artifacts. And yet, paradoxically, this frail boy achieved in death what few great kings managed in life. His tomb, nearly intact, gave us the most complete picture of Egyptian royal burial ever discovered. His treasures reshaped art, his face became the symbol of Egypt itself, and his name, once nearly erased, is now immortal. The boy who reigned for less than a decade became the most famous pharaoh of all time. This is the irony of Tutankhamun's legacy. In life, he was weak and overshadowed. In death, he became eternal. But the story does not end there. Even today, Tutankhamun's tomb continues to yield mysteries. The possibility of hidden chambers beyond its walls remains unresolved. Objects within the tomb show signs of being repurposed from others, suggesting a hurried burial or even political intrigue. Questions linger about who truly ruled during his reign, whether his queen Ankhesenamun attempted to align with foreign powers after his death, and whether others sought to erase his memory. Tutankhamun may be the most studied pharaoh, yet his life remains filled with unanswered questions. And so, as the world gazes upon his golden mask, we are reminded that Egypt's secrets are never simple. They dazzle, they frighten, they inspire, but they also conceal. Tutankhamun's tomb is both a revelation and a riddle. It shows us the wealth of a civilization determined to master eternity, yet it also hides traces of haste, fragility, and secrecy. The so-called curse may be myth, but the deeper mysteries of his death and burial remain unsolved. His legacy is not only in the treasures he left, but in the questions that still haunt us. The young king's death was not the only mystery Egypt preserved, for just as tombs can be sealed and forgotten, so too can memories. Some rulers were not merely lost, they were deliberately erased, their names chiseled from stone, their images defaced, their histories rewritten. If Tutankhamun's fate was to be remembered by accident, others were condemned to oblivion by design. This leads us to another of Egypt's greatest secrets, the missing pharaohs of history. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb remains one of the most dramatic moments in the history of archaeology. What Carter and his team uncovered was not only a treasure chamber, but a snapshot of a vanished world, perfectly preserved by chance. The small size of the tomb, the unusual placement of objects, and the signs of haste in decoration all suggest that his burial was arranged in great urgency, as if the court had been caught unprepared for his sudden death. Yet in this hurried arrangement lay a paradox. The very accident of circumstance, the fact that his tomb was modest compared to those of greater kings, ensured that it escaped the attention of robbers for centuries. Other pharaohs with grander tombs were looted in antiquity, their riches melted down, their bodies stripped and hidden. Tutankhamun's modest chamber, overlooked and buried beneath debris from later constructions, remained intact. His obscurity saved him, and in saving him, made him immortal. The objects within the tomb overwhelm in both scale and detail. Among them were golden shrines nested one inside another like protective shells, a set of thrones and chariots, weapons both ceremonial and practical, clothing folded with care, and even toys and walking sticks. More than 130 canes were found, a startling number for so young a king, but evidence that his physical condition required their constant use. Intricate jewelry glimmered in the dim light of torches, scarabs carved from carnelian, pendants of turquoise and lapis, amulets of gold inscribed with protective spells. Each object was more than an ornament. Each was a tool for the afterlife, chosen with symbolic precision. Even the mundane items, jars of food and wine, were tokens of survival, proof that the Egyptians believed the afterlife mirrored earthly needs. What captivated the modern world most of all was the golden mask. Resting over the mummy's face, it became an icon of ancient Egypt. In its serene features, in the lapis-inlaid eyes, and the polished gold surface, people saw not only a boy king, but the embodiment of eternity. The mask was not intended to be admired by living eyes. It was crafted as a vessel for the soul, a substitute face that would endure long after flesh had crumbled. Yet in being revealed to the world, it transformed into something larger, a symbol that redefined how we think of Egypt itself. And yet behind the splendor was fragility. The mummy of Tutankhamun had suffered damage, both ancient and modern. When Carter unwrapped the body, the heat from resins used in embalming had fused the wrappings into the flesh, making removal destructive. In the process, the body was dismembered, its limbs separated. Later analyses suggested that the corpse had been burned inside the tomb itself, perhaps by a chemical reaction between oils and oxygen when the chamber was sealed. What was meant as preservation may have accelerated destruction. Even in death, Tutankhamun was not immune to mishap, his body bearing scars not only of disease and accident, but of the rituals meant to save him. Science has since transformed him from myth to man. DNA studies conducted in the early 21st century revealed that Tutankhamun was the son of Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh, who attempted to replace Egypt's pantheon with worship of a single sun disk. His mother, identified through genetic analysis, was Akhenaten's own sister, an unnamed woman whose remains were found in a cache of royal mummies. This revelation confirmed what many suspected. Royal inbreeding was common, intended to preserve dynastic purity, but carrying heavy genetic costs. Tutankhamun's bones reveal deformities consistent with such lineage. He suffered from scoliosis, a cleft palate, and club foot. Far from being the robust image depicted in some statues, he walked with difficulty, supported by his many canes. Malaria parasites detected in his remains suggest repeated bouts of fever and weakness. His life, though wrapped in royal grandeur, was marked by pain. How then did he die? The question remains unsettled. The fractured leg, discovered in scans, may indicate an accident, perhaps a fall from a chariot or a wound from battle. Infection from the injury, combined with malaria, could have overwhelmed his frail body. Some suggest foul play, a conspiracy in the court seeking to end his reign for political reasons. His widow, Ankhesenamun, left desperate letters to foreign rulers after his death, begging for aid, suggesting turmoil and danger. No single theory explains all the evidence, and so Tutankhamun's death remains a mystery, one of many threads that make his story so compelling. Around his tomb, the myth of the curse grew larger than life. Newspapers of the 1920s printed lurid tales, linking every death or misfortune to the mummy's supposed vengeance. When Lord Carnarvon died, shortly after the discovery, legends spread that the lights of Cairo flickered at the moment of his passing, and that his dog howled and fell dead on the same night. Others in the expedition who later died of unrelated causes were claimed as victims of the curse. The truth is far more mundane, but the allure of the curse was irresistible. It played upon deep fears, the ancient sense that disturbing the dead invites retribution. The Egyptians themselves inscribed warnings in tombs, threats that intruders would face annihilation at the hands of gods. Though scholars view these as symbolic, the idea lingers in the imagination. In Tutankhamun's case, it created a legend that has endured nearly as strongly as the treasures themselves. Even now, the tomb continues to yield puzzles. Studies of pigments suggest that parts of the walls were painted hastily, perhaps by artisans under pressure to complete the work before burial. Some objects inside bear inscriptions naming other rulers repurposed for Tutankhamun in haste. These clues support the idea that his death was sudden, leaving insufficient time for the elaborate preparations normally given to a pharaoh. What was meant to be a temporary solution became eternal, for his hurried tomb is the one that survived intact. It is one of history's ironies that this boy king, relatively insignificant in life, became in death the eternal voice of Egypt. Tutankhamun's legacy is not merely archaeological but cultural. His discovery ignited global fascination with Egypt. The treasures toured museums around the world, drawing millions. Movies, novels, and art drew upon his image, embedding him in the fabric of popular imagination. In this sense, Tutankhamun achieved immortality of a kind the Egyptians might not have foreseen. He became not only a god in the afterlife, but a symbol for generations of the living. And yet, his story is still unfinished. Hidden chambers may yet lie behind his walls. His cause of death may remain forever uncertain. His brief reign, overshadowed by those before and after him, may yet conceal political secrets lost in the erasures of history. Tutankhamun endures as both revelation and riddle, dazzling us with gold while reminding us of how much we do not know. But the boy king's mysteries are only part of the larger enigma, for if Tutankhamun's name was nearly forgotten, others were deliberately erased. The sands of Egypt conceal not only tombs but the memory of rulers condemned by their successors, their names struck from monuments, their images obliterated, their legacies hidden. To understand why, we must follow the thread from Tutankhamun back to his father Akhenaten, whose heresy against the gods led to one of the most deliberate acts of erasure in human history. Tutankhamun's tomb was sealed more than 3,000 years ago, yet the questions it raised still echo today. His treasures dazzled, his mask became the symbol of Egypt itself, and his so-called curse spread fear and fascination around the world. But perhaps his most enduring legacy lies not in gold or myth, but in the way his body became a key to science. The boy king's remains, fragile and burned, continue to reveal secrets that reach beyond his short life, shedding light on the dynasty that produced him and the world he inherited. For centuries, the body of a pharaoh was the most sacred of objects. To disturb it was unthinkable. But modern research, guided by care, has allowed us to peer into Tutankhamun's flesh with tools his embalmers could never have imagined. Computed tomography scans, DNA sequencing, and radiological studies have turned his body into a map of both disease and dynasty. From these we know that his lineage was tangled by inbreeding, that his health was compromised by genetic disorders, and that his death may have been sudden and brutal. Far from being a glorious conqueror, Tutankhamun was a fragile figure, a young man who walked with a cane, plagued by pain and weakness. This portrait does not diminish him. Instead, it makes his survival all the more remarkable, for despite his frailty, he bore the weight of a throne that claimed divine authority. The contradictions of his reign reflect the turbulence of the era. His father, Akhenaten, had broken with centuries of tradition by worshipping a single deity, the Aten, the radiant disk of the Sunday. This revolution undermined temples, priests, and the very order of the cosmos as Egyptians understood it. When Akhenaten died, Tutankhamun was little more than a child. The court around him, perhaps guided by powerful advisors, restored the old gods and re-established the temples. The boy king's name itself reflects this reversal. Born Tutankhaten, the living image of the Aten, he became Tutankhamun, the living image of Amun, a god of the old pantheon. His reign marked not so much his own will but a pivot in history, a correction that erased his father's radical experiment. It is this tension between memory and erasure that makes Tutankhamun's story resonate. His tomb survived by accident, while many others were plundered or destroyed. His body, though damaged, endured, while those of greater kings were hidden in caches to protect them. His name, nearly erased from history, was restored by chance when his tomb was found. He became immortal not because of his deeds, but because of the strange lottery of time. In this sense, he embodies the paradox of Egypt itself. The civilization built for eternity, yet eternity revealed itself not through its greatest monuments, but through a single boy's modest burial. The legend of the curse, though dismissed by science, lingers because it touches something deeper than fact. Ancient Egyptians believed that names and bodies had power beyond death. To disturb them was to tamper with cosmic order. Whether the curse was real or not, the unease it inspired is rooted in that truth. Entering a tomb is not like opening a vault. It is intruding upon a carefully constructed machine for immortality. Even now, when archaeologists descend into Tutankhamun's chambers, the air dry and heavy, the walls glowing with faded paint, there is a sense that the place is alive, that it resists intrusion. The so-called curse may be myth, but the atmosphere of the tomb makes the myth feel plausible. Tutankhamun's story does not stand alone. His reign was a brief flicker in the long arc of Egypt's history, yet it connects to some of the greatest mysteries of that world. His father Akhenaten remains a figure of fascination, a heretic king whose revolution in religion was so profound that later generations tried to erase him entirely. His queen Ankhesenamun disappeared into obscurity after his death, perhaps caught in palace intrigue that may have claimed her life. His burial chamber, small and hurried, hints at the existence of hidden rooms, perhaps even containing other figures whose tombs are lost. Each piece of his legacy points outward, toward other enigmas still unsolved. And so the boy king endures as a paradox. He was weak, yet his memory became immortal. His reign was brief, yet his tomb became the most famous of all. His treasures overwhelm, yet his story is filled with absence, with haste, with mysteries that resist explanation. He is a king defined as much by what we do not know as by what we do. Perhaps this is why Tutankhamun continues to captivate. He reminds us that history is not a completed book but a puzzle missing pieces, that even in the age of science and satellites there are mysteries that remain just beyond reach. As the desert night falls over the Valley of the Kings, the tombs lie in silence, their entrances shadowed, their corridors filled with stale air. Tutankhamun rests among them, his mask gleaming in a museum far from where he was buried, his name spoken across the world. His story has been told 1,000 times, yet it is still incomplete. For every question answered, another arises. Did he die from accident, illness, or conspiracy? Were his treasures made for him, or repurposed in haste? Do chambers still lie hidden beyond his walls? The boy king keeps his secrets even as he reveals them, but his mystery is only one thread in the larger tapestry of Egypt. If Tutankhamun survived in memory because his tomb was overlooked, others vanished because their names were deliberately erased. His father Akhenaten, the heretic who dared to defy the gods, was condemned to oblivion. His successors hacked his name from walls, smashed his statues, and tried to erase him from history. Other pharaohs, too, were struck down not by death, but by the politics of memory. Their secrets are not buried in tombs, but in silence, in deliberate absence. The missing pharaohs of history form the next chapter in this story, where erasure itself became the greatest mystery of all. There are kings whose tombs are lost to the sand, and then there are kings whose very names were stolen from memory. To be forgotten in Egypt was the greatest punishment, for to erase a name was to destroy the soul. Monuments could be toppled, temples dismantled, but nothing struck deeper than chiseling away the hieroglyphs that carried a ruler's identity. The Egyptians believed that as long as a name was spoken, the spirit lived on. To silence that name was to condemn a person to a second death, one more final than the grave. It was not time that condemned these rulers, but their own people, wielding erasure as a weapon sharper than any blade. Among the most striking of these missing pharaohs is Akhenaten, a king whose vision shook the foundations of Egyptian religion. In the 14th century, before the Common Era, he abandoned the worship of Egypt's countless gods and raised instead a single symbol, the Aten, the glowing disk of the Sunday. Temples were stripped, idols smashed, priests left powerless as he built a new capital at Amarna and dedicated its streets and temples to the Aten's light. In reliefs carved during his reign, Akhenaten and his queen Nefertiti are shown not with stiff divine majesty, but as intimate figures, playing with their daughters beneath the rays of the sun disk. For a moment, Egypt turned toward a radical vision that blended monotheism with personal devotion. Yet the experiment was doomed. After Akhenaten's death, the court reversed course. His successors restored the old gods, reinstated the temples, and condemned the heretic king. His images were smashed, his cartouches chiseled from stone, his statues buried or broken. The city of Amarna was abandoned, left to crumble in the desert wind. To later generations, Akhenaten's name was not to be remembered, his revolution treated as a dangerous aberration. He was condemned to what the Egyptians called damnation of memory. In their eyes, he was to have no afterlife. His erasure was meant to make him vanish, not only from this world, but from eternity. But memory has ways of returning. Archaeologists who rediscovered Amarna in the 19th century uncovered a city frozen in time. Fragments of statues, broken temples and inscriptions spoke of a reign that official history had tried to bury. Today, Akhenaten stands as one of the most compelling figures in Egypt's story, a ruler whose experiment foreshadowed ideas of monotheism centuries before they appeared elsewhere. His enemies succeeded in erasing him from their present, but they failed to erase him from ours. His story is a reminder that history is never as permanent as stone. Even when carved deep, names can vanish. Even when destroyed, memory can return. The Amarna period remains one of the most enigmatic in Egyptian history. For nearly 2 decades, the court lived in a city that was later erased, its records scattered, its rulers forgotten. Nefertiti, who once shared power with Akhenaten, disappeared into shadow. Was she co-ruler? Did she reign in her own right under another name? Her body has never been identified. The daughters of the royal couple, shown so vividly in art, also vanish from the record. Even Tutankhamun, their likely son or nephew, came close to being forgotten, his brief reign overshadowed until his tomb brought him back to light. The Amarna period is like a page half torn from a book, leaving fragments of story but no complete picture. It is both a silence and an echo, a gap in history that refuses to close. Akhenaten was not the only ruler subjected to erasure. Hatshepsut, one of the few women to rule as pharaoh, reigned in the 15th century before the Common Era and left behind grand monuments, including her stunning mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari. Yet, after her death, her stepson and successor, Thutmose III, ordered her name and images erased from many monuments. Statues of her were smashed, inscriptions recarved to omit her reign. Why? Perhaps it was vengeance, or perhaps a political act meant to re-establish the masculine line of kingship. Whatever the reason, it nearly succeeded in obscuring one of Egypt's most remarkable rulers. Only through later excavation and study did her true role emerge, her face reconstructed from fragments, her legacy restored. These acts of erasure reveal something profound about Egypt. The pharaohs built for eternity, yet they feared memory more than stone. To strike out a name was to strike at the soul. Their monuments were immense, but their vulnerability lay in words. The missing pharaohs are not only those whose tombs lie undiscovered, but those whose very identities were targeted, their existence transformed into absence. It is this deliberate silence that makes their story so haunting. The sands conceal bodies, but politics concealed memory. In both cases, we are left with mysteries that demand reconstruction. Archaeologists trace erased names with fingertips, reading shadows where chisels once struck. In some temples, the outline of Akhenaten's name still lingers, faint but visible, as if memory resists erasure. In Hatshepsut's temple, fragments of statues have been pieced together, her face returning from shards. These are not discoveries of treasure but of identity. They remind us that history is not only about what survives, but also about what was meant to be destroyed. The missing pharaohs of history leave us with questions as profound as any sealed tomb. Why were some condemned and others spared? What secrets lay within the Amarna period, hidden by deliberate silence? How many rulers, their names erased, remain unknown to us entirely? To explore these mysteries is to step into a different kind of tomb, one made not of stone but of silence. And in that silence we hear the faintest whispers of rulers who sought eternity but were denied it by their own successors. Yet, even erasure could not hide everything. Some secrets were preserved in ways no chisel could touch. The Egyptians turned not only to stone but to the stars, embedding knowledge in the heavens themselves. If names could be erased from walls, constellations could not be so easily destroyed. The next chapter of our journey leads us into the sky, where the pharaohs aligned their tombs and temples with cosmic order. ensuring that even if their names were forgotten, their monuments would remain bound to the eternal rhythm of the universe. The story of Egypt is written in stone, yet just as often it is written in silence, where names have been scraped from walls, where faces have been broken from statues, and where monuments stand with deliberate gaps. We glimpse the presence of rulers who were meant to vanish. The ancient Egyptians feared chaos above all things, and chaos was not only violence or famine, it was also the disruption of order in memory. To remember a pharaoh was to uphold Ma'at, the cosmic balance. To erase one was to declare that their very existence had broken that balance and must be cast into oblivion. Akhenaten remains the most famous victim of this damnation of memory, but he was not alone. The Amarna period left behind a trail of rulers whose identities flicker in and out of the record like shadows. Smenkhare, a mysterious figure who may have been a brother of Akhenaten, or perhaps even Nefertiti ruling under another name, appears briefly in inscriptions and then disappears. His tomb, if it exists, has never been found. The boy king Tutankhaten, who became Tutankhamun, reversed his father's heresy, but his reign too was nearly erased until accident preserved it. Another ruler, Ai, an elderly courtier who succeeded Tutankhamun, left only fragments of his presence, his burial disturbed, and his memory dimmed by his successors. Each of these figures was swept into silence, leaving us with questions that echo louder than answers. Erasure was not always punishment for heresy. Sometimes it was a tool of politics. Pharaohs sought to strengthen their legitimacy by minimizing or obliterating the achievements of those who came before. Thutmose III, often called the Napoleon of Egypt for his conquests, nearly erased Hatshepsut from memory, chiseling her name from monuments and replacing her cartouches with his own. Hatshepsut had ruled as king, not merely as queen regent, taking the full titulary of pharaoh and adorning herself in masculine symbols of power. Her reign was prosperous, her temple at Deir el-Bahari, a marvel of architecture, her expeditions to Punt legendary. Yet to later eyes, a female pharaoh threatened the patriarchal order, and so her memory was attacked. Statues were smashed, reliefs defaced, inscriptions recarved. For centuries, she nearly vanished, her reign hidden until archaeologists pieced together the evidence. Other rulers, too, fell victim to erasure when dynasties shifted. The turbulent Second Intermediate Period saw rulers of foreign origin, the Hyksos, who were later depicted as invaders. Their names were diminished in official records, their memory framed as a dark interlude before the glory of the new kingdom. Later still, the Libyan and Nubian dynasties that ruled Egypt for centuries were often marginalized in chronicles composed under different powers. The erasures remind us that history is not neutral. It is shaped by those who write it, by those who chisel the hieroglyphs, by those who decide which names endure and which are silenced. What survives of these missing pharaohs is often indirect. In Amarna, the city Akhenaten built, broken statues and shards of pottery tell stories that official records deny. In Luxor and Karnak, faint outlines of chiseled cartouches hint at names once proudly displayed. In caches of mummies, royal bodies, stripped of identifying inscriptions, lie anonymous, their identities guessed at through DNA and forensic reconstruction. The work of archaeology becomes not just excavation but resurrection, bringing names back to life from silence. Each rediscovered name is a reversal of ancient punishment, a restoration of memory once condemned to oblivion. And yet, not all can be restored. The deliberate destruction of records means some rulers may remain forever anonymous. Their tombs may never be identified, their deeds forever lost. For every Hatshepsut pieced back together, there may be another pharaoh whose memory was erased too thoroughly, whose reign lies buried beyond recovery. These gaps are not failures of archaeology, but testaments to the power of erasure itself. In trying to silence their enemies, later rulers created mysteries that endure longer than monuments. The missing pharaohs challenge us to think about history differently. They remind us that what survives is not always what mattered most in its own time. Great rulers may vanish, forgotten or deliberately erased, while minor kings endure by accident. Tutankhamun's fame today rests not on his reign, but on the chance survival of his tomb. Akhenaten's legacy endures because of the very strangeness that led to his erasure. Hatshepsut lives again because archaeologists refuse to accept the gaps in the record. Memory is fragile, and in Egypt, where eternity was the goal, its fragility is the greatest irony of all. This tension between survival and erasure points toward a deeper truth. The Egyptians understood that to endure forever, one needed more than stone and gold. One needed memory, one needed to be spoken, one needed to be aligned not only with the earth but with the heavens. For while names could be erased from walls, the stars above could not be touched. Pharaohs turned to the sky as their final refuge, aligning their tombs and temples with constellations, embedding their identities in cosmic patterns that would outlast chisels and hammers. Even erased from stone, they sought permanence in the rhythm of the universe. It is to these celestial secrets that our journey must now ascend. The erasures left by history are as deliberate as they are haunting. A broken statue or a chiseled name tells us not only about the one who was erased, but also about the hand that ordered it. Erasure was power, the final gesture of a ruler seeking to dominate not just the living but the dead. To strike a name from a wall was to strike a spirit from existence. To shatter a face was to deny a person recognition in the afterlife. These actions carried both political calculation and spiritual weight, for Egyptians believed that eternity depended on remembrance. The missing pharaohs remind us that power in Egypt was measured not only in monuments, but in memory. Consider the strange fate of Akhenaten. His revolution was vast, reshaping temples, beliefs, even the very art of Egypt. Yet within a generation he was cast out of memory. His statues were buried or destroyed, his city of Amarna left to crumble, his name scrubbed from stone. Inscriptions that once praised him were recarved with new names, his cartouches reduced to faint outlines on temple walls. To later rulers, he was not a king but an aberration, a danger to the divine order. And yet, in seeking to erase him, they gave him a peculiar immortality. His absence became a presence, his silence a question. Today, he is one of the most discussed of all pharaohs, his heresy a subject of endless fascination. The attempt to erase him only made him endure in a different form. Hatshepsut too defied erasure. Though her statues were toppled and her inscriptions altered, her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari remained a masterpiece too great to vanish. Archaeologists pieced together fragments of her broken images, reconstructing her story from the ruins. In doing so, they restored to history one of Egypt's greatest female rulers, a woman who took on the full titles and regalia of kingship, who sent fleets to Punt, and who built monuments that still awe us. Thutmose III may have tried to erase her, but the stones themselves preserved her defiance. Memory survived in architecture, waiting for rediscovery. The missing pharaohs are not only individuals, they represent the fragility of history itself. Records can be altered, names destroyed, stories silenced. Yet absence has a strange power. It invites curiosity. The gaps in Egypt's history are as compelling as the monuments that still stand. Every erased name is a question. Every broken statue is an invitation to wonder who it once represented. The silence of the missing rulers is not empty, it hums with possibility. Modern science has begun to bridge some of these silences. DNA analysis has linked unnamed mummies to royal lineages, restoring identities thought lost. Radiological studies reconstruct faces from skulls, giving form once more to rulers whose names were stolen. Archaeologists tracing faint cartouches in half-erased inscriptions bring voices back into history. Each act of restoration defies the ancient attempt at oblivion. Where chisels once sought to silence, lasers and computers now revive. In this sense, the missing pharaohs have become symbols of resilience. They remind us that even when power tried to erase, memory finds ways to return. And yet, the mystery remains part of their allure. We cannot know all their stories. Some rulers may be gone beyond recall, their names obliterated so thoroughly that no fragment remains. Others may lie hidden still, their tombs sealed in sand, their treasures intact but invisible. The desert guards not only bodies but identities. For every king restored, another is missing. For every name rediscovered, another is gone. Egypt's eternity is incomplete, full of voids and silences that are as much a legacy as its temples and pyramids. What the missing pharaohs teach us is that immortality in Egypt was a fragile dream. To endure forever, one needed more than monuments and treasures. One needed memory. One needed to be inscribed not only in stone but in the sky. And so many pharaohs turned to the heavens, aligning their tombs and temples with constellations, encoding their identities in patterns of stars. Stone could be defaced, names could be chiseled out, but Orion still rose in the night, and Sirius still heralded the flooding of the Nile. The stars became a truer eternity than any monument. Thus, the story of the missing pharaohs leads naturally into the story of the heavens, for where memory failed, the cosmos endured. The pharaohs sought not only to be remembered on earth, but to be bound forever to the rhythm of the universe. Their monuments stand as earthly reflections of celestial order, proof that even as names were erased, their connection to the stars could never be broken. And it is in the astronomical alignments of their tombs and pyramids that we glimpse the next great secret of Egypt, one written not in stone or silence, but in the eternal language of the sky. The monuments of Egypt were not built only for earth, they were built for the sky. The pharaohs believed that eternity was not confined to stone chambers or gilded coffins, but written into the stars themselves. To ensure their immortality, they aligned their pyramids, temples, and tombs with celestial bodies, embedding their lives into the rhythms of the heavens. In this way, even if their names were erased and their monuments fell, their connection to the cosmos would endure forever. The Great Pyramid of Giza is the most famous example of this celestial ambition. Its sides are oriented almost perfectly to the cardinal points, aligned with such precision that modern engineers still marvel at the achievement. Scholars have argued for centuries about how this was done. Some believe the builders tracked the motion of circumpolar stars, others that they used the rising and setting of the sunday. Whatever the method, the result was clear. The pyramid was not merely a tomb, it was a cosmic compass, a monument that tied the pharaoh's soul to the eternal order of the universe. The shafts that run through the Great Pyramid deepen the mystery. Some point directly to stars that were sacred in Egyptian belief. One narrow passage aligns with Orion's belt, representing the god Osiris, lord of the underworld and eternal life. Another points to Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, associated with the goddess Isis, and with the annual flooding of the Nile that sustained Egyptian civilization. These were not accidents. They were deliberate choices, ensuring that the pharaoh's soul could ascend along these cosmic pathways to join the gods among the stars. The pyramid itself became a machine of resurrection, bridging earth and sky. Temples across Egypt echo this same cosmic architecture. At Karnak, the great temple of Amun is aligned so that at the winter solstice, the rising sun shines directly along its axis, flooding the sanctuary with light. At Abu Simbel, colossal statues of Ramses II sit in darkness for most of the year, but on 2 days believed to be the pharaoh's birthday and coronation, the rising sun penetrates the temple's interior, illuminating the statues of the gods seated within. These alignments were more than architectural marvels. They were statements of divine power, proof that the pharaoh could command not only men and stone, but the very heavens. The stars guided not only temples, but tombs. In the Valley of the Kings, ceilings of burial chambers are painted with maps of the night sky. Golden stars scatter across deep blue plaster, constellations marked out in detail. The Book of the Heavens, inscribed on these walls, describes the journey of the sun through the night, a guidebook for the king's soul. To lie within these tombs was to lie beneath a painted cosmos, an eternal sky that mirrored the one outside. Even underground, the pharaoh remained bound to the stars. The Egyptians saw no divide between astronomy and religion. The flooding of the Nile, on which all life depended, was heralded by the rising of Sirius just before dawn. The appearance of Orion signaled the season of planting. The movements of the stars were not abstract patterns but the living pulse of the gods. By aligning their tombs and temples with these patterns, the pharaohs placed themselves in harmony with cosmic order. Their reigns became part of the eternal cycle of the universe, and their deaths became passages into it. Modern science has confirmed the precision of these alignments. Archaeologists and astronomers working together have measured the orientation of pyramids, the axes of temples, and the painted ceilings of tombs. The results reveal a civilization deeply attuned to the sky, one that wove astronomy into every level of life and death. To dismiss these alignments as coincidence is to underestimate the genius of Egypt. They were farmers guided by stars, priests who saw gods in constellations, and builders who set stone to mirror the heavens. What this reveals is a culture that understood eternity in both physical and cosmic terms. The body was preserved through mummification, the name through inscriptions, the memory through monuments. But the soul, the essence of the pharaoh, was launched into the sky. The alignment of pyramids and tombs was the launch pad, the architecture of ascension. When we look at the stars above Egypt today, we see what the pharaohs saw. Orion still rises, Sirius still blazes before dawn. The same sky still holds the pathways they believed would carry them into eternity. And so the astronomical alignments of Egypt's monuments remind us that their secrets were not confined to stone. They are written across the heavens, where chisels cannot erase and time cannot destroy. Even when tombs are lost, when names are defaced, when bodies crumble, the stars remain, holding the pharaoh's eternal dream. But if the heavens reveal order, the earth still holds riddles of engineering. For the greatest monuments of all, the pyramids themselves, remain puzzles not of alignment, but of construction. How were these vast mountains of stone raised? What machines of labor and ingenuity made eternity possible in blocks of limestone and granite? That is the next great mystery the pharaohs took to the grave. The pyramids rise from the desert like frozen mountains of stone, their angles sharp against the sky, their sheer bulk defying imagination. For millennia they have inspired awe and disbelief. How could a people without iron tools, without modern cranes or engines, raise such colossal monuments? Legends have spoken of lost civilizations, of giants, even of help from beyond the stars. But the truth, though no less astonishing, is far more human. The pyramids were not built by miracles but by knowledge, organization, and determination on a scale rarely seen in history. For a long time, outsiders imagined the pyramids were built by slaves, whipped into submission beneath the desert Sunday. But excavations around Giza have revealed something else entirely. Villages of workers, complete with bakeries, breweries, workshops, and barracks, show that the laborers were not slaves, but skilled craftsmen, engineers, and seasonal workers who took part in a national project. Bones uncovered in cemeteries near the pyramids show signs of careful medical treatment, evidence that injured workers were cared for, not discarded. The building of the pyramids was a collective enterprise, a unifying effort that drew farmers during the flood season, when fields were underwater and agricultural labor was idle. In this way, the pyramids were not only monuments to kings but monuments to society itself. The question of how such massive blocks were moved remains one of the great puzzles. The limestone casing stones weighed several tons each, while granite blocks from Aswan weighed up to 70 tons. Theories once imagined wooden rollers, but the sands of Egypt would have swallowed them. More recent evidence suggests that sledges were used, dragged over the sand by teams of men. On the walls of a tomb at Deir el-Bahri, a painting shows workers hauling a colossal statue on a sledge, with water poured onto the sand ahead of them. Modern experiments confirm that wetting sand reduces friction dramatically, allowing heavy loads to slide more easily. This simple technique, born of observation, may have been one of the pharaoh's greatest secrets. Yet sledges alone cannot explain how blocks rose hundreds of feet into the air. Here, ramps enter the story. Long, straight ramps, spiraling ramps around the pyramid, or internal ramps hidden within the structure. Each theory has its supporters. Archaeological traces show remnants of massive ramps near some pyramids, and at sites like Hatnub, inscriptions describe workers dragging stones up slopes with the help of wooden posts and ropes. The most compelling theory suggests a combination. Enormous external ramps to raise the first levels, then more intricate systems, possibly internal passageways, to move blocks higher as the pyramid grew. The precision of construction adds another layer of wonder. The base of the Great Pyramid is almost perfectly level, within a fraction of an inch across more than 13 acres. The stones fit so tightly together that even a sheet of paper cannot slide between them. This was achieved not by machines but by copper chisels, dolerite pounders, and above all, by patient skill. Workers shaped and polished stones with relentless effort, adjusting each piece until it locked into place. The organization required was immense, a feat of logistics that involved quarries, transportation, food supply, and coordination of thousands of people over decades. Modern scanning projects like scan pyramids have revealed further mysteries. Thermal imaging has detected anomalies inside the Great Pyramid, voids and chambers not yet explored. One cavity above the Grand Gallery may be a space left to relieve pressure, or it may hold secrets still unknown. The idea that hidden chambers remain even after centuries of study reminds us that the pyramids are not solved puzzles but living mysteries, still keeping their silence. What drove the pharaohs to undertake such colossal projects? More than vanity, the pyramids were engines of belief. They were designed as stairways to the heavens, their sides angled to mirror the rays of the sun. To ascend the pyramid was to ascend into eternity. Each block was a step in a ladder reaching from earth to sky. The labor was not merely construction but devotion, an offering of human strength to secure the pharaoh's immortality and, by extension, the stability of the cosmos. In truth, the pyramids are as much about people as they are about kings. They embody the coordination of thousands, the skill of masons, the persistence of haulers, the vision of architects. They are monuments not just to pharaohs but to the collective genius of Egypt, a civilization that bound stone, labor, and belief into forms that defy time. To walk among them is to feel both the enormity of human ambition and the humility of its execution, for every stone was laid by hand, one after another, until mountains of eternity stood complete. And yet, even if we understand ramps and sledges, even if we map voids and analyze stone, the pyramids retain an aura of mystery. They are too vast, too precise, too enduring to be reduced to simple explanations. They whisper of secrets still hidden in their chambers, of motives still obscured by millennia. Engineering may solve the how, but the why, the deep motives of kings who sought eternity in stone, remains partly veiled. And it is in those motives, in the hidden knowledge of ritual, medicine, and magic, that Egypt preserved its most forbidden secrets. To walk into the tomb of a pharaoh is to walk into a library of secrets. Every wall, every scroll, every carved symbol was part of a system of knowledge that bound together medicine, ritual, astronomy, and magic. The Egyptians were not only builders of stone but keepers of wisdom, a wisdom they believed necessary for both life and the afterlife. Much of this knowledge was practical, born of observation, while some was hidden in spells and rituals whose meaning we are only beginning to decode. What has survived gives us glimpses of a civilization that stood at the threshold between science and mystery. What is lost may have contained secrets beyond our imagination. Among the most remarkable pieces of this legacy are the medical papyri. These ancient scrolls, written in hieratic script, describe treatments that range from the practical to the mystical. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, dated to the 2nd millennium before the Common Era, reads like a surgical manual. It describes injuries to the head, neck, chest, and spine, detailing symptoms, prognosis, and treatment. The tone is astonishingly clinical, with phrases such as "an ailment I will treat" or "an ailment not to be treated," showing an understanding of triage that feels strikingly modern. The Ebers Papyrus, meanwhile, contains hundreds of prescriptions, from herbal remedies to incantations. It mentions treatments for asthma, heart disease, and digestive problems, blending practical recipes with prayers to ward off spirits. These documents show that the Egyptians were not ignorant or superstitious alone. They were observers, experimenters, and healers, their knowledge advanced for their time. The Egyptians also developed prosthetics, evidence of which has been found in mummies. Wooden toes, leather sandals adapted for deformities, and splints for broken bones reveal a society that cared for the disabled and sought to restore function. In a world where the body was sacred, preserving and repairing it was more than medicine, it was a spiritual duty. Yet even here, practical knowledge mingled with ritual. Spells were spoken over wounds, charms placed with prosthetics. To heal was to act not only on flesh but on the unseen forces that influenced it. Beyond medicine, the Egyptians preserved the secrets of the afterlife in texts known collectively as the Book of the Dead. These were not single books but collections of spells written on papyri or painted on tomb walls, guides for the soul's journey through the underworld. They described encounters with gods, trials of judgment, and the weighing of the heart against the feather of truth. Each spell was a password, a formula that gave the deceased passage through dangers and into eternal life. To enter the afterlife without these spells was unthinkable. Knowledge itself was the key to survival beyond death. Other texts, like the pyramid texts and coffin texts, trace the evolution of this ritual knowledge across centuries. They reveal how Egyptians saw the universe as a place of constant struggle between order and chaos, light and darkness, life and death. The pharaoh, as both king and god, was central to maintaining balance. His tomb was not just a place of rest, but a machine of resurrection, filled with the words and objects necessary to navigate eternity. Every amulet, every painted scene, every inscription carried power, a hidden code in a language of the divine. Yet much of this knowledge was lost. Libraries that once held countless scrolls have vanished, their papyrus consumed by fire, rot, or conquest. The famed Library of Alexandria, though built centuries after the pharaohs, reminds us of how fragile knowledge can be. How many scrolls from the age of the pyramids were lost before we could read them? How many cures, spells, or histories disappeared into ash? The fragments that survive suggest a richness beyond measure. What is missing can only be imagined. Some secrets may still lie hidden. Tombs sealed for millennia may yet contain papyri unrolled since they were buried. Caverns beneath temples, caches in forgotten chambers, and archives buried by shifting sands may one day yield treasures of knowledge greater than gold. For now, we have only glimpses. Enough to know that the Egyptians possessed an understanding of the body, the stars, and the soul that was both practical and mystical, rooted in observation yet guided by belief. Forbidden knowledge is a modern phrase, but to the Egyptians it was truth. To heal the sick, to embalm the dead, to command the gods with words, these were not skills for all but secrets kept by priests, passed from one generation to the next, often hidden from outsiders. To reveal them without initiation was to risk chaos. The priests of Amun guarded their rituals as jealously as kings guarded their treasure. To read the spells was to wield power, and power was never given lightly. This blending of science and magic makes Egypt so difficult to categorize. They were not modern, but neither were they primitive. Their medicine anticipates clinical reasoning. Their astronomy aligns with precision. Their rituals embody both symbolism and psychological insight. What they left behind defies simple classification. They were seekers of knowledge, convinced that eternity itself could be mastered if only one knew the right words, the right formulas, the right alignments. Yet knowledge was not only preserved. Sometimes it was deliberately hidden, buried in tombs and temples to protect it from those unworthy of its power. Just as treasures of gold were sealed to keep them from robbers, treasures of wisdom were buried to keep them from the uninitiated. And, like the treasures of gold, much of this wisdom was stolen, scattered, or destroyed. Some was lost to ancient tomb robbers who burned papyri for light. Some was lost to time itself. But the possibility remains that hidden scrolls lie waiting, secrets that the pharaohs truly did take to the grave. And so Egypt's forbidden knowledge leaves us with both awe and hunger. We see enough to recognize their genius, but never enough to fully grasp it. Medicine, magic, ritual, astronomy, all blend into a tapestry that is only partly visible. What is missing teases us with the thought of wisdom lost forever. And yet sometimes what is lost is not simply misplaced. Sometimes it was stolen, for not all tombs remained sealed, not all treasures of gold or wisdom remained hidden. Tomb robbers, both ancient and modern, broke the seal of eternity and carried away what kings and priests sought to preserve forever. And it is to those vanished treasures that the next chapter leads. The tombs of the pharaohs were built as fortresses of eternity, but eternity is a fragile dream. From the moment the last stone was set and the last door sealed, another story began. The story of intrusion, theft, and loss. For as long as tombs were built, there were men who sought to break them open, to strip away gold and jewels, to reduce sacred chambers into plunder. Some of these robbers struck in ancient times, only years after burials, while others came centuries later. The result is that much of Egypt's treasure has vanished into silence, melted down, sold, or scattered into collections far from the Nile. The Egyptians themselves were aware of this danger. In the Valley of the Kings, inscriptions on tomb walls curse intruders, warning of annihilation in the afterlife. Priests placed hidden doors, false passages, and massive stone blocks to deter thieves. Guards were posted, seals stamped with divine symbols, but hunger and greed often proved stronger than fear. The very wealth that made pharaohs immortal made them targets. Even in antiquity, officials recorded trials of robbers caught tunneling into tombs. Confessions speak of groups of men working at night, breaking open walls, stripping mummies of gold, burning wrappings to find hidden amulets. Their words, preserved on papyri, give us glimpses of crimes that turned eternity into ashes. The scale of ancient looting was immense. By the time archaeologists entered the Valley of the Kings in the modern era, most tombs had already been robbed. The great treasures of pharaohs like Ramses II or Seti I were gone. What remained were fragments, statues toppled, sarcophagi smashed, walls scarred by chisels. Tutankhamun's tomb became so famous precisely because it was the exception, a chamber that survived almost intact by chance. The others had long been emptied, their riches vanished into the furnaces of ancient goldsmiths. Faced with this loss, priests in later dynasties took drastic measures. They gathered mummies from plundered tombs and hid them together in secret caches. In the 19th century, such caches were discovered at Deir el-Bahri and in the Valley of the Kings, containing dozens of royal mummies bundled together in haste. Here lay Ramses the Great, Seti, and others, stripped of their original splendor, placed side by side in undecorated pits. Their treasures were gone, but their bodies survived. This act of reburial was not robbery but rescue, an attempt to preserve at least the sacred flesh when all else had been lost. The modern age brought its own kind of plundering. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, before archaeology had matured, tombs were often opened and emptied with little regard for preservation. Artifacts were sold to collectors, scattered across museums in Europe and America, or lost in private collections. Even today, countless objects sit in vaults far from Egypt, their origins unclear, their meanings fragmented without the context of the tombs from which they came. What we see in museums is only a fraction, a patchwork of what once existed in dazzling unity. The staggering thought is how much remains unaccounted for. Gold enough to fill halls, papyri enough to form libraries, statues, jewelry, chariots, weapons. Millions of objects may have been lost forever. Some were melted, others buried again, some perhaps still hidden in undiscovered tombs beneath the desert sands. Archaeologists, armed with radar and LiDAR scans, suspect that chambers still lie beneath the Valley of the Kings, waiting. But for every tomb that may yet be found, countless others were erased by robbery, their treasures irretrievably gone. The robbers of antiquity sought wealth, but in their theft, they also altered history. They stole not only objects, but knowledge. A tomb intact is a time capsule, a story told in arrangement, symbolism, and detail. Looters smashed and scattered those stories, leaving only fragments for us to piece together. The loss is as much intellectual as material. We may never know the full funerary rituals of some kings, the exact texts of their spells, the complete imagery of their journey into the afterlife. In robbing gold, the thieves robbed memory. And yet, what survives is still extraordinary. Even fragments, broken statues, painted shards, scraps of papyrus reveal a world of richness. The story of tomb robbing reminds us that what we have is only a fraction, a shadow of Egypt's full grandeur. For every artifact on display, 1,000 others may have vanished into silence. This tension between what is found and what is lost shapes our vision of Egypt. The mystery lies not only in what we see, but in what we will never see. The vanished treasures of the pharaohs remind us that eternity is never guaranteed. Gold melts, papyrus burns, names can be erased, but the fascination endures. The sense that beneath the sands more secrets lie hidden, that treasures beyond imagining may still wait, keeps Egypt alive in our imagination. Every tomb discovered renews that hope. Every fragment found deepens the mystery. And so, though much has been lost, the possibility of more keeps us searching. For if tomb robbers and time have stolen much from us, they have not taken everything. What we have uncovered, though incomplete, still reshapes our vision of the past. And what is left to uncover promises to reshape it again. Egypt's mystery is eternal, for every door opened reveals another unopened. The pharaohs built for eternity, but time and theft made eternity fragile. And yet, through this fragility, they endure more strongly than ever. The journey now approaches its end. We have walked through their tombs, studied their bodies, traced their erased names, measured their monuments, and mourned their vanished treasures. But the greatest mystery of all remains unsolved, the question of why Egypt continues to captivate us, why these kings and queens who lived thousands of years ago still speak to our imagination today. It is to this eternal mystery of Egypt that we must now turn. Egypt is a land of paradoxes. It is a place where stone was meant to last forever, yet where names could be erased in an instant. It is a civilization that dreamed of eternity, yet whose treasures vanished into the hands of robbers. It is a culture that placed its faith in gods and rituals, but also in engineering and practical science. And though more than 3,000 years have passed since the last pharaoh was laid to rest in the Valley of the Kings, Egypt continues to command the imagination of the world. The mystery is not only in what was built or buried, but in why it still speaks to us so powerfully. Part of the fascination lies in scale. The pyramids rise from the desert like frozen time, their geometry defying centuries of wind and war. To stand before them is to feel the weight of human ambition, the sense that entire generations labored for the vision of one man who believed himself eternal. No photograph can capture their immensity, no replica their presence. They are reminders of what humanity can achieve when belief and will converge. The same awe that they inspired in ancient travelers still grips us today. Another part lies in mystery. So much of Egypt remains unknown. Tombs still lie hidden beneath the sands, chambers unopened, inscriptions unread. Technology reveals hints of what might remain voids within pyramids, anomalies in the Valley of the Kings, but confirmation always lies just beyond reach. Even the treasures we have found are fragments of a larger whole, their meanings incomplete. The sense of missing pieces, of unanswered questions, fuels imagination. Egypt invites speculation because it never gives up all of its secrets. There is also the allure of the people themselves. Pharaohs like Ramses the Great, Hatshepsut, Akhenaten, and Tutankhamun are more than historical figures. They are characters in a grand drama of ambition, belief, and power. Some sought eternity in stone, others in memory, others in revolution. Their successes and failures, their erasures and restorations, mirror the struggles of humanity itself, the desire to be remembered, the fear of oblivion, the clash between order and chaos. When we speak their names today, we participate in the very act they feared and desired most: remembrance. The Egyptians themselves believed that to be remembered was to live forever. Tomb walls are filled with pleas to speak the names of the dead, for in speech the soul endured. Perhaps this is why Egypt still holds us. Every time we tell the story of Tutankhamun or Akhenaten, every time we marvel at the pyramids or gaze upon the mask of gold, we continue their immortality. In our fascination, they achieve what they dreamed of, eternal life. And yet, beyond fascination, there is something deeper. Egypt confronts us with the question of mortality itself. These kings, who commanded armies, who built monuments larger than mountains, who claimed divine power, all fell to death. Their bodies were wrapped, hidden, prayed over, armed with spells and treasures, yet they too crumbled into bone and dust. Their defiance of death is inspiring, but it is also tragic. In their struggle we see our own, for we too seek meaning, remembrance, and perhaps eternity. The mystery of Egypt is ultimately the mystery of being human. What we have uncovered is vast temples, texts, mummies, treasures, but what remains hidden may be greater still. For every tomb opened, another lies waiting. For every scroll read, another has vanished. For every name remembered, another has been erased. Egypt will never be fully known, and that is its final secret. It is not only a civilization of the past, but a puzzle that lives in the present, inviting every generation to search again, to wonder again, to dream again. The pharaohs built for eternity, but eternity itself was their greatest riddle. They sought to master it with stone, with spells, with stars. Time and theft broke their defenses, yet in breaking them, made them immortal in another way. They endure not only in tombs and museums, but in imagination, in the unending fascination they inspire. Their legacy is not only in what they built, but in what they concealed. And so the story ends as it began, with secrets still locked away, with the desert keeping watch, with the stars shining overhead. The pharaohs took many secrets to the grave. Some we have recovered, some remain buried, some may never be known. But as long as we continue to search, as long as we continue to speak their names, Egypt's golden age whispers to us still, daring us to uncover what lies beyond the silence of time.